I know.
Vodka.
That would be amazing.
Sounds like an ASMR.
So let's get this thing started.
Right. I'm gonna rub some soft sounds. Yes. We could just entertain ourselves for the next hour and a half, right?
No, it's so interesting not being able to see all the people.
I know, right?
We can make up stories about all of them. There's 130 people that are logged in so far.
That was quick.
Number 79 is my favorite.
Right.
I'm more preferential to 125, actually. I like the higher numbers, you know, high ranks.
We know.
Someone wanted to make it known that we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
I like multiples of 7.
I know.
They say 7's a good number.
I'm glad people are helping us confirm that the chat is working.
Yeah.
Hi, Laurie.
Hey, Laurie. Ah.
Oh, we got a fan club going.
Oh, shit, yeah.
They're not for me. They're for you.
Man, that number keeps rising quickly.
Yeah. Well,
Just
we're
don't
trying to
look
hit 500, right? That's the goal.
Yeah.
Somebody didn't like it. So
Yeah.
too soon. Like, oh, Bruce, this was not what I thought this was.
I know. All I heard was vodka. Yeah. That's amazing.
There's my legacy.
There you go.
Welcome.
Hopefully the way that we're starting, Kristen, will make it past the 15-minute mark. People.
It's true.
So as people are joining, one of the things that we were curious about, if you would share with us in the chat, is how you're feeling entering today's conversation. If you would be so kind. Excited, curious, optimistic, I dig it. Yeah. Ready, that's a good one. Yeah.
Anybody nervous? Oh, there we go. Got angsty.
Ah,
Oh, these are moving too quick for me.
I know.
I know.
that's what starts to happen, right?
It's so cool to see some, like, a lot of familiar names out here. Either like my HR network is crazy, or my HR network's kind of crazy.
Optimistic but emotionally drained.
Ooh,
Revolution.
Necessary but hard.
Very good.
yes, the revolution is now, guys.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm guessing we should probably get moving. If you're continuing to, as you jump in, share how you're feeling entering into the conversation, we really appreciate it. We are ready to inspire in the way that hopefully you're ready to be inspired. Hi, welcome. My name is Kelly Poulsen, and I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the DisruptHR Philly team who put this together. So we haven't been together as the DisruptHR Philly community in a long time for a multitude of reasons. And it comes as no surprise to any of us that the world has turned upside down many times over in the course of the last few months. And HR has really been put to the test in a variety of different ways. And we all know as a community that we've got the ability to make impact, an important impact. So whether it was beyond navigating the pandemic and working remotely and all of the things that came along with that, now more than ever, there's a growing urgency and support to impact racism in our world, in our communities, and in our workplaces. And, you know, we wanted to have this conversation to create space so that we feel that we can connect as a community, to share how we're feeling, ask questions, and, you know, get real on what's happening out in the world. So with that, I am going to hand things off to someone who may be familiar to you if you've been a part of DisruptHR Philly events in the past, Kristen Bell, who was a speaker as well as an MC at certain points. And I will leave it in her very capable hands to introduce you to the phenomenal panel that we've got today.
Thank you, Kelly, and welcome everybody. We are very excited to have this conversation, which is extremely timely and also so late. We want you to get a lot out of this conversation, and so you're not going to get that from me. The two goals, so I'm going to try to speed this up and get to the heart of the program. We have two goals for you. The first is that you know more at 6 o'clock when this is over than you did right now at 4:30. That is, like, can you commit to doing that in your living rooms or in your bedrooms or wherever you are right now? And the second one is to be ready and willing to do something, to actually take action, to actually step up and say, this is different this time, and I'm going to do something about it. So those are our two goals for you. I want to just jump into this. This is our panel. These highly esteemed individuals, I cannot wait to talk to them. They are going to introduce themselves by way of a 6-word memoir. Those of you who are not familiar, it's actually an interesting story. I'll tell it to you very quickly because I bought this microphone and I want to use it. The 6-word memoir has its roots with Ernest Hemingway. He was in a bar and he was challenged to tell a story or write a story using only 6 words that would evoke emotion. And he came up with this story: baby shoes, for sale, never worn. He won the bet in the bar. People did have emotions on that and they wanted to know more about the story. So I've invited our panelists to do just as Ernest Hemingway did. And just going from left to right, we'll start with Bruce.
All right. Mine is to wear or not wear a mask.
Excellent. Thank you. Mylena.
Mine is encouraging authentic leadership and risk-taking.
Beautiful. Kayla?
Living in my most authentic truth.
Beautiful. And Beth?
Overwhelmed but hopeful, working for change.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Like I said, the meat and potatoes of this conversation is not with me, so I am going to jump right into it with the first question. And that question is a question that came from our audience, actually. The question is, what is the right way to reach out and support Black employees? How do we be thoughtful, but not so careful that we're too politically correct or delicate? And Kayla, I was hoping you could chime in on that one first.
Yeah, so I think right off the bat, from the perspective of let's talk about like colleague to colleague or peer to peer. If you want to be respectful, just ask. It's a little bit draining to have to, as a person of color or to identify as a Black person or African American in this space, to constantly be asked to relive some of this stuff. So I ask you to be considerate. I ask you to be respectful of their emotions and just to not expect somebody just to talk to you just because you asked them to, and give them that out. As an HR professional, I ask that we are asked to be confidential. We are asked to provide safe spaces for folks. So I ask you to be that confidant for folks so that they have a safe space to ask questions, especially these allies who are looking to not offend folks and they need that point of contact to go to.
And Kayla, what does that look like? If I am an HR person and I want to proactively reach out to one of my Black employees, what's the appropriate way to do that? I want to be respectful. I want to create a safe space, but I also want to make sure that I'm being proactive and not just waiting and hoping that they come to me.
Well, do it a bit more generally, right? Like, I hope you're not just targeting that one Black employee. Say, hey, can I talk to you because like this stuff is going on, and like that seems a little awkward, right? So just open up safe spaces. We created these Just Us support circles, which were fantastic. And we just gave them voluntarily. Hey, come join us, have your voice heard, express yourself a little bit, hopefully start this healing process a little bit as well. And then you'd be amazed about the people who will then follow up with you because they see that that candidness is there and that they know you want to listen.
Great, thank you. Bruce, when you and I talked earlier, you had mentioned that you were getting a lot of texts from your white friends, and you had some feelings about that. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, it makes you feel good in a way that people are actually looking out for you and saying, okay, you're a Black person, I care about you. These are some really challenging times that people like you are going through, and I want to make sure you're okay. But what's interesting is that there can be a tendency to make it more about yourself.
Hmm.
And that's a huge problem and a red flag. So if you are an ally, or that's how you look at yourself, and you are, a non-Black person talking to a Black person about this, and the first words that come out of your mouth is, "This is how it made me feel," and then you start talking about how it made you feel and all of the things that you didn't know about, versus actually addressing the problem and saying, "Hey, how do you feel?" and really listening versus more talking. I find that to be an issue that a lot of people take, for sure.
Right. So I reach out to you, but then I want you to know what it's like for me. So then you can make
Exactly.
me feel better.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful. One of the things that Mylena, you and I talked about is a lot of the sort of statements that companies are putting out, the conversation around making Juneteenth a national holiday. What impact is that having? When you think about that, is that getting to actual action? Is that promising to see, or does it feel some other kind of way?
I actually, sometimes I kind of, thumb my nose at that, if I'm totally honest. Because I wonder, okay, well, you have Juneteenth on Friday, but when I come back to the office on Tuesday, what's going to be different about our culture? Whether you are giving lots of money to an organization or taking these stances, that's great, but that's more about your external marketing to some extent. I want to know what you're going to do to make my day-to-day reality in your organization better. And so that's one part of what I think. And then the thing that I've been thinking about, and I think it's happening, as the second wave ekes up, I think focus on this is going to go down. And again, it's one of those things, it's kind of like a roller coaster. So I wonder about the sincerity of a lot of these organizations as they speak to this issue. They're going to go fight a different fire and this is going to be forgotten. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I think.
I hope you're wrong too, but I am curious. From my perspective, this feels different. I can speak for people in my community. White people are having a conversation today and the last 3 weeks that they were not having 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when there were other sort of demonstrations around Black Lives Matter. Do you have a perspective on why this feels different, or am I wrong about that, Mylena?
A couple of thoughts. I think the reaction that people have had this time is a little different. I think COVID was kind of a mixed bag. And what I mean is people had time. I remember my uncle is about 80 years old. I remember once asking him, like, why weren't more of our family members on the front line? My family's from Atlanta. He was like, baby girl, we had to work. And if you think about what COVID has done, it's given people flexibility in terms of time so that they can check in, they can see what's going on around them, they can go to protest. And I think that's great. But when I think about the sustained effort, one of the things that really strikes my mind, how do you deal with real policy change? I think it's great that white people are having these great conversations, but it's kind of like me and, eating healthy. Do you talk about it and then you eat the burger anyway? What do you actually do other than talk? And I think when you start to look at organizations as they move toward equity measures within organizations, I worry about things like backlash. And now we will start to entertain conversations around, is this fair? Do I feel like I'm losing now to be more inclusive? I do think that issue is probably going to be tied to whatever efforts organizations make. People feel bad, but what does it mean when you have to make space?
Interesting. Yeah, I like the concept, right, of what about on Tuesday or some random Thursday? How is my life actually different at your workplace? It brings up sort of the broader question of the D&I initiatives, right? How do we create an inclusive workplace? I think this is going to get really meaty. So, Beth, let's start with you. What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you doing in your workplace that's driving more inclusion?
Yeah, this is actually interesting because 2 hours ago, I spent an hour talking to 7 other HR leaders in Philly about D&I initiatives and coming up, just kind of listing out what everybody is doing, how we can work together. We had a lot of talk, I think, to Mylena's point about diversity metrics and what those mean, and how to do it in a way that isn't box checking, that and one of the women in the call runs HR for a very small company that is largely white, and her staff is all like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to increase diversity? And she's like, guys, you have to understand that we are this many people, and if we want to increase diversity, who's volunteering to quit, right? Like, who's making space for these new hires that you want us to bring in? Because if we're a 20-person company, we're a 20-person company. And so I think it's a really important question that we all, I mean, especially people of privilege, need to ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say, like, I reject my privilege, but also I'm going to keep it. You know what I mean? And so I think that it really starts with education for the staff around what privilege is, who has it, in what ways, who doesn't, how to identify when you're sort of clutching it and like it's sort of making you uncomfortable, the decision you might have to make, even though you know it's the right decision.
You know, thank you. That reminds me of an article that Kayla sent me earlier today, which talks about an actress I hadn't heard of, and Kristen Bell, who I have heard of, giving up their roles as white actresses, doing the voice of, I think, biracial characters in a cartoon. So this concept of giving something up for sort of, you know, the betterment is a really interesting one, and related to privilege. I feel like somehow privilege has become like a nasty word. Like, white people cringe at it. They can't understand it. They reject it. It's like hardcore, like, what? You're telling me I didn't work hard? Like, F you. Yes, I did. I'm not privileged. Yada, yada, yada. And the conversation gets shut down. And I'm curious what you guys think about that. Like, Bruce, from your perspective, am I wrong? And if I am, please shame me in front of all these people. But also, if I'm right, why is privilege a bad word?
No, you're absolutely right. People want to believe, 2 points for you. People want to believe that all of the things that they've accomplished in their life, they actually did the work for it. And no one wants to be told that you started on second base or you started on third base, and so that gave you the upper hand on other people who didn't. But it's absolutely true. And you should know that. I mean, if you're a Black person that was able to go to private school and you came from a family with wealth, then you're more privileged than a Black person who grew up that was poor. I mean, everyone has some type of privilege. I mean, I didn't grow up in the best neighborhood, but I also didn't grow up in the worst neighborhood either. So in a way, privilege is relative to where you are, what you have, the resources that were given to you, and how you were able to leverage those resources to get to where you get to. So I wouldn't think that, I mean, privilege shouldn't be a dirty word, but in America and in our country, people just want to believe that everybody pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. And I mean, you'll listen to an entrepreneur that says, I mean, think about this. A company can say, I bootstrapped my company because they took in $1 million of friends and family money. And to them, they started a company with nothing because they raised $20 million. It's like, oh, I started off with nothing. Oh no, just, a couple cousins and a couple uncles just throwing $1 million. That's it. We barely had anything. And we grew this $100 million company. And you're like, wait a minute, are you hearing what you're saying? $1 million. That's a lot of money. But you don't want to think about it like that. You always want to downplay what you have to make it seem like, oh, well, I didn't start off with this, or I didn't start off with that. And it was hard for me too, but it wasn't. And be proud that it wasn't that hard, because you may not have been built to be able to survive in that environment where it really was hard. So for anybody who does have a problem with owning their privilege, please don't own it, and don't necessarily feel guilty about it. Just be aware of it and internalize it to know that, hey, I didn't get here all by myself, but no one can get anywhere by themselves. So wherever you're born or wherever you are, or the color of your skin, whatever that gives you, whatever privilege that provides you, then just own it, but make sure that you're also using it to help other people. And that's when you can feel even better about it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Beth, what would you say as a white person speaking for all white people?
Yes, I'm glad that you invited me onto the panel so I could speak for all white people. Yeah, privilege, it feels like, I don't know, like I didn't ask for it, I think is a lot of the feelings that I get when I have that icky response to the word privilege. It's like, I didn't ask for it. I didn't choose like who I was born to or where I was born. And frankly, I was born and like raised in a very socioeconomically depressed, poor family. So I can share some experiences, like I wasn't as privileged as like my trust fund friends in college, but I also acknowledge that I still have privilege and that I got to start several steps ahead. And so I think to Bruce's point, and I had actually written this down earlier today, was like, yeah, own your privilege, but once you own it, what are you going to do with it, right? And I think that goes back to what we've been talking about, was how are you going to make space? Like, what are you willing to give up? Because your privilege is powerful if you want to use it. And little things like, I get asked to speak on panels like this, not super frequently, but sometimes. And I made a commitment to myself very recently, and honestly far too late, that I'm not going to speak on a panel that isn't diverse, that doesn't have people of color on it. And if that means I give up my spot for that person of color to be able to join the panel, then that's what that means. But I think it's important, and I'm willing to give that up. And so I think it's important to know where your privilege plays out for you, what advantages you get from it, and where you can use that to benefit somebody else, which means you have to give something up.
Yeah, interesting. Kayla, what would you add to this conversation from your perspective, and maybe even how it shows up in your organization? You work with employee resource groups on a regular basis, doing D&I for Aramark. Like, how does privilege show up in the conversations that you're having with your employees?
Yeah, so especially within our employee resource group, something I hold my employee resource, my ERGs, I'm going to say it shorter because that's a long word. So for my ERGs, I always challenge them to ensure they have even diversity within themselves. It because we are a large organization and we tend to have a lot more white leaders, we end up having kind of a lot of white leadership within our own employee resource groups. So I challenge them. I'm like, hey, we're supposed to be embodying this diversity. What privilege do you have as leaders and in this platform? Because you're ERG leaders. Like, you're not just hiding over here on the side. Like, I'm putting you on platforms. I'm putting you up here. So how can you use these platforms that have been given to you to amplify and pull some other folks above you, not above you, but with you, maybe above you actually. Like, if you can put some other people up in the higher roles, even more fantastic. But like, we talk about that sponsorship piece of it, right? Like, that's really what that is. Like, I want you as an ERG leader, put your neck out there and say, hey, this person has been a high performer. I'm going to put them on my committee lead so they get that leadership experience they need, because everybody needs experience to become a leader. So why not do it here? Promote them on up, and then they progress throughout the organization. And it's some of our most fantastic success stories when it comes to seeing diverse people, not just Black people and African American folks, but also women as well. We utilize those ERGs heavily as those talent pipelines.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if ever there were employees that had to, manage a cognitive load, right, of trying to either be two people at once or code switch kind of constantly, but also get their job done, it's these people. And if that's not a sign of leadership, I'm not sure what is, right? The ability to have all kinds of stress coming at you and still perform, to me, that's the kind of leaders we would want in our organization.
Yeah, there's some amazing folks out there who are putting in double, triple the work that you may not know about. All this amazing work that you see from employee resource groups, they're coming from folks who are dual impact employees. We're not even calling it their second job anymore. We're calling it dual impact, because you are making a huge impact in the organization, because we're holding you to a standard to make a business impact.
Yeah, yeah. Mylena, when you and I talked, we were chatting about some of the things that we can do in our organization. I think you call them caring bystanders. And I'm hoping you can share what that means to the audience and how that might look in an organization.
The concept of a caring bystander is this idea where within an organization, the leaders make a point to make it clear what their values are. In addition to making it clear what their values are, what those values look like in practice. And from that point, it becomes where we all take responsibility for being accountable for those values. So let's say if you have a situation where we're in a conference room and you and I, Kristen, are having a conversation, and I overhear a conversation that's inappropriate, off color, could possibly be offensive, recognizing that I heard it and I have an obligation to do something with it. And I don't necessarily have to go to HR. Don't get me wrong, HR is always an option, but looking at how can we all see ourselves as people who help to curate and cultivate the workspace that we work in. I might not want to make a formal complaint, but I might want to catch you in the hallway and go, hey, I kind of heard what you said to Kelly. Did you notice her body language when you said that? Or she kind of up and left the room? You might want to dial that back a little bit and consider how that landed. Thinking about how we can do that more so than ignoring those things, because all too often, I think we know those people and those behaviors in our organizations that are alienating at times, but we're like, well, it wasn't aimed at me. I didn't do it. I'm going to mind my business. And I think that's how you start to have cultures where behaviors that are inappropriate not only flourish, but they become more and more inappropriate and offensive, because it's taken as, you know, hey, you can get away with this kind of thing here. Or if the persons who are offended don't feel empowered enough to say something or push back, then some people sometimes get the idea that they're okay with that behavior and, you know, they have a thick skin. So when I think about caring bystanders, it's really this idea that leaders and organizations really teach their people what their values are. And we all hold the standard up by saying, look, we're not going to let certain things happen on our individual watches, so to speak.
Yeah. So we need leaders who have the courage to say, hey, we don't do that here. Like that kind of sort of hard stance is what
it's not just leaders, it's colleagues, rank and file. We work together. I know your cube is down the way from mine, because when we make it just the responsibility of HR or the C-suite, there are only a small number of the folks who work in these organizations. It's got to be something that we all own. It's our mutual responsibility, because the C-suite guy, he wasn't there when somebody cracked the inappropriate joke coming through the lobby. He wasn't there. So, but I'm there and I should say something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So some of these sort of microaggressions, I suppose, as people have learned to call them, or subtle acts of exclusion. Bruce, what would you say? Like, how can I, if I'm an employee in I am actually an employee at an organization. So if I'm at work and I see this happening, what do I do? Tell me from your perspective, what would you do?
What would I do as me, or am I telling you, what should you do?
Answer the question as you wish.
All right. So, I mean, it can get interesting. Again, I don't want to simplify it and dumb it down, but it really is holding people accountable.
Yeah.
And the way that I think about it is the company as a product. And as a CEO of a product company, it's all about creating habit-forming actions. And so to bring your mission, vision, values into habit-forming actions, whatever that looks like in regards to how you build your culture, it should be some type of thing that's happening over and over again. I don't know if that's a workshop. I don't know if there's something like this that's happening internally. It could be a form of an ERG, but you have to create some type of habit-forming action that gets people in the mindset of holding each other accountable. Mm-hmm. And because once you hold somebody accountable, it's best to even do it in front of other people, because all of a sudden people say, oh, wow, if I do that, I'm going to get called out for it. And everybody is not going to change, but you change one person and then that person changes two people change 6 people. And all of a sudden it gets to the point where, sorry to say, that even if people don't believe it publicly, at least they won't do it, or at least, to themselves, they may not even agree with what everybody is saying in the company. And that's the difference between company values versus personal values, but at least they won't do it because they're afraid of being shamed. And I don't think it's necessarily the company's job to try to change the personal mentality or the mindset of employees, but at least you can change it so that they don't act a certain way or say certain things in the workforce. Yeah. Just that small win would make the workforce a much more healthy place to be.
Great. Thank
Kristen,
you.
I'd love to give people a quick tip to help them there.
Please.
So I recently, through all this work and stuff, a colleague of mine recently said, one easy way to become this upstander, so instead of going from being a bystander to an upstander, is if you hear something, just say ouch. Just say, like, just take that moment to pause, and creating that little bit of awkward silence. People are not comfortable in it. So it's an easy way to bring attention to it without having to feel like you need to go into a whole dissertation and why that was wrong and all of these things. Just that pause is enough for people to think.
Yeah, that's great. Just a little pause will, you think that they'll sort of fill that silence because they're sort of awkward with it, right? Some fumbling apology might come out.
Probably, yeah. It'll take them a second to second guess it, like second think, oh, well, why did they say ouch? What did I say? Because some people just spew at the mouth without thinking, and they just need that second.
Yeah, my sense is in that scenario, if I'm that person, I might be pulled to defend my intentions. Oh my God, I didn't mean to. Oh, I would never, I didn't, like that. Tell me why that's bad.
Why it's bad to
Or is it? Is it bad to defend my intentions in that moment, right?
No, it's a learning moment, right? I think at the end of the day, at least for me personally, right? I want to know why you said that, to be honest with you. Like, I really would like to know your intentions behind that joke. Maybe it is an innocent joke and you didn't understand that it was an issue. Like, you know, oh, somebody just tell me, like, let's say they make a comment about my hair or something, and they thought it was really nice, and I actually took it a little bit offensively, like, ooh, like, that wasn't okay. And then that creates that dialogue, and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that that was offensive, or I didn't realize that that was a problem, or this joke has been in my family for decades. This is the thing that we've been doing. So you need to give people that chance to talk, and it's okay to be told that that one thing you did was wrong. We're human, right? We're supposed to learn, we're supposed to change, we're supposed to grow.
Yeah. If we walk through our lives trying to not offend anybody, we'll probably offend most people.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
And Kristen, I now want to shift this conversation to a much more real place to be.
It's the new MC now.
Think about it.
You should have let him use the microphone.
A much more real place, because as I'm listening to Kayla speak and the question that you were asking, Kristen, I'm thinking, in theory, that sounds great, but what happens when someone hears their boss or their boss's boss, or someone that they're afraid that if they check them or that they say something, they'll get fired? Courage. Like, at the end of the day, we're asking for courage for you, to a degree, to put your personal values over everything else and say, you know what? Something may happen to me. I may get written up. I may even lose the promotion. And that's where it becomes hard. And that's the hard work, because there's a lot of things that companies can do, and they can say, oh, we're going to do this and have an ERG. But what it really comes down to is people doing the hard work. And the hard work is saying, you know what, regardless of the consequences, I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say, because this is going to make this company better. And I don't necessarily want to work for a company that wouldn't allow me to say this, especially if I'm doing something positive. It's not just freedom of speech for the sake of me saying whatever crazy thing that I want to say. It's actually saying, hey, what you said made this person feel uncomfortable, or it sounded discriminatory, or was biased, and you should know better. You're a manager, you're a director, you're an EVP, whatever it is. And so at the end of the day, I think what we're asking for is courage.
That's great. Courage and maybe some personal convictions, right? Being willing to stand up for that. That's great.
Yeah.
Beth, it looked like you were.
HR has to be in a position to be able to make people feel safe enough to be able to do that too. Because a lot of people don't feel safe that HR will have their back when they do stuff like that.
Right. I mean, an HR has to be an ally because the reality is company culture. Yes, company culture comes from all of us, but it starts at the top. And so if the leaders in your company are saying that kind of stuff and no one's calling them out on it, then it sends a message to everyone that that language is okay. And then it becomes much harder to start to have a culture where there are these caring bystanders, because they've all been taught that that's not what we do here. And so I think you're right, Bruce, like, you need the courage. And I know, like, I was like, should I say this or should I not? Because I acknowledge that what I'm about to say probably comes from a place of privilege, but do you really want to work for a leader who can't take that education and doesn't value you the same way that they value their other employees, you know? And I know that not everyone has the luxury of choice of just saying, oh, well, if you fire me, I'll just go find another job. I acknowledge that, but I do think that the less we call our leaders out, the more bad behavior we see. The more we call them out, the more they learn that their workforce is not going to stand for this. And it becomes increasingly harder to hire people because nobody wants to work in that environment anymore. So I think there is a possibility of creating this cultural change within an organization that has that bad leadership. But unfortunately, there could be a few casualties at the beginning. So make sure you're allies with HR because they are there to help protect you, because you should not be fired for calling your boss out on a microaggression.
I think that's part of the challenge within organizations as well, when HR is the only outlet. I think organizations have got to figure out how to have people in key places in varying positions so that you can have somebody to have your back when you need to have those conversations, particularly if you don't have what I refer to as a go to hell fund, where you know you need your job. I mean, seriously, a lot of us cannot afford to be like, you know what, I'm out. Some people can't do that. And that financial issue is a real barrier for some people with respect to standing their ground. And I think we've got to figure out how to get people within their organizations who are at varying ranks. So if it's not my boss that I feel comfortable going to, maybe there's another vice president or somebody with the title that I think is weighty enough who will go with me or serve as a mediator in there somewhere. Because if you are frankly afraid, you're probably not going to say anything. You're probably not.
Yeah.
You know, Mylena, it brings up the idea of HR's role, right? And you know, Beth, you painted a beautiful picture of HR being this advocate and we've got your back and stuff. And I think I might make some enemies on this, but
not always true.
Sad reality is that in a lot of organizations, HR is still protecting the organization. They're still looking to cover up the bad things that are happening, right? And so sometimes these, I don't know, complaints maybe don't get taken quite as seriously, or it's harder. And so it actually brings up to me the question of HR and how can we create more allies in HR and beyond? And how do we do that? Mylena, I'd love to hear what you think about that. It kind of reminds me of the conversation that we had a couple days ago.
I think there are a couple of things. On one hand, HR, this is a horrible comparison, but I can't think of anything right now. I'm thinking like of a two-headed serpent. You know, HR it exists to protect the organization from liability, and that's just the reality of why HR is in place. HR is a kind of mediator between the interests of the employer and making sure employee rights are protected. But if I had to talk about what I think about HR, I'll tell you what I tell employees when I go into organizations and I do harassment workshops and diversity workshops. And somebody, I guarantee it always happens, they catch me walking to my car at the end of the day. Hey, let me tell you what happened to me. And the first thing I have to say is, you realize your employer hired me. So when you say what you say to me, recognize what obligation I have. I'm not saying that you should not disclose the issue, but you got to realize what side of the table I sit on here. And so with that being said, I think sometimes we give people the false impression that HR has one specific focus. HR, depending on how you look at it, might have a conflict of interest in many cases. But with that being said, I do think HR does need to do the work, whether it's creating ERGs, specifically getting people in significant roles to indicate that they are willing to be allies, to be an alternative resource for people to go to. HR has to cultivate that, because ultimately, if people feel trapped and feel stuck, you're going to have one of two things. People who are going to exit the organization at their first opportunity, or they're going to keep coming to work, but they're not engaged. They're doing just enough not to be fired. So with that, we've got to figure out within the organization, how do you get people to be buddies, to be allies, and not force them into it? It's really about being clear about what your values are as an organization. One of the things that I think many organizations don't do well enough is own their real culture. I mean, if you know what your environment is like, own it. Tell people what it's like to work there. And if you think that's something to be ashamed of, then you need to fix it. But stop bringing people into these spaces where you know it's toxic and you don't plan to do anything about it.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
You know, Kristen, I also, just to, from an HR perspective, I think we put a lot of emphasis here about HR's role in supporting employees, but we also have work within ourselves to do and in our own teams. I'm not sure if any of y'all's HR events or conferences or some of these bigger meetings, but they tend to be majority white and majority women. Mm-hmm. Where's the diversity within our own ranks and within our own HR departments? It's not just within diversity to bring in the people of color. So I definitely task all of us on the call, if you're trying to relate to your employees and you're trying to open up these discussions and you're trying to understand a bit more, like, let's look at ourselves as well and how what we can do to build up our own teams and provide more representation so that they feel more comfortable to talk to HR about this and feel like they're actually being heard. Because I've seen a lot of HR folks dismiss folks because, oh, that doesn't make sense. I've never experienced that. So like, that can't be real.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It sort of thinks, to me, it reminds me of sort of maybe two different kinds of allies, right? There's sort of the white ally that we have the responsibility to be, and the black ally, right? Like having more Black people in the organization that you can go to that get the experience, that won't whitewash it or whatever that this ally might do. Yeah, I really like that. Hey, let me flip this on you, Kayla. What about the D&I professionals? It strikes me, I've been to a couple of D&I conferences, and they are not mostly white women. They're mostly Black women, and a lot of the gays.
Yes.
So what do you make of that? And should we be flipping that as well, or what sense do you make of that?
Honestly, candidly speaking, I have been getting a little like kind of tired of going to some of these D&I events. I feel like we're talking about the same stuff over and over again. It's the same people in the same room having the same discussions. We need to get more allies. We need to talk to senior leadership. We need to cater our strategies to the needs of our white leaderships. Like, yes, we do to some extent, and don't get me wrong, I think some of those strategies do work and they're valuable, but honestly, I don't know if it's working. I don't know if I've been seeing the change. And honestly, is it worth us continuing to have the same conversations with the same people in the same room? Like, that's why I feel like today I see a lot of these names I know, because we've been to some of these conferences. We're always disrupting this space. That's why we're here today. But how are we going to start having some of these D&I conferences or some of these D&I sessions and bringing the folks that need to hear it? Instead of having us be it feels like it's always like a train the trainer, right? Like, you come in, I learn it, and now I got to go take it back to my organization and try and implement it by myself. Like, what can we do to bring in these other folks?
Yeah, it's like the sort of double pressure, right? So your pressure of the role, pressure of your own experience as a Black female in the role, right? Now I got to go teach everybody else how to be better to people like me. Like, that's a lot of baggage.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work. It's
Yeah.
a lot of work. And then also, I feel sometimes, are we broken records? Because you're hearing it from the same people all the time. And we're trying to do these things all the time. Like, how can we pull these people into the same room and these same conversations?
Yeah. And I mean, let's be just real with folks. If Black people could have solved this problem, I'm guessing we would have done it by now.
Yeah.
Right?
This is Black woman in charge?
No, we just been waiting.
Yeah, this is a white person problem. I think that maybe more white people should be joining the D&I conversations, at least conferences, at even better, but the roles themselves in organizations. Bruce, what do you think about that? You've been around this space quite a bit in your career.
So it's interesting, as a company that is selling a product to help HR leaders with data. One of the things that we always talk about is diversity. What does that mean to you? Are you focusing on it? And one of the interesting things that I found is that when we talk about things start at the top, I believe diversity starts at the top as well. And so the companies that I talk to are a little skewed because most of them are tech companies, but even still, it's pretty interesting sample size. When I ask them, what does diversity mean to them? It depends on if the CEO is a woman, then diversity is we want to get more women. If the CEO is LGBTQ, then it's more about bringing in people from different sexual orientations. Unfortunately, because I'm targeting tech companies, rarely is the CEO Black. So never really even have that opportunity to figure out what that even looks like. But even veteran status, people have told me, oh, the CEO is a veteran. And so diversity to us means we want to get more vets into the business, which is awesome, which is great. It's a great initiative. But just D&I on the surface means so many things to so many different people that when you're saying, oh, we need to become more diverse, then you have a lot of people saying, oh, well, we need diversity of thought because this white guy that grew up in Montana is so different than New York, which technically, sure, that's true, but They're both white dudes that are 30 and wear t-shirts. Come on, I mean, but that is true. I mean, I guess they think differently. And so it really comes down to how you're going to define diversity and what does that even mean. But to Kayla's point, the diversity conferences and webinars that I've attended, it does seem like the same people and the same circuit of people preaching to the same people who already believe in it. And I do think if we're going to call it ally, advocate, whatever we want to call it, that it does need to be more white people, because then it goes back to the holding people accountable. Yeah. And then, honestly, just like you made the point, Kristen, if we could solve the problem, we would have solved it a long time ago. It might take a white man or a white woman who has a D&I role to be in a room to make people feel comfortable enough and to make the recruiters feel comfortable enough, because that's where it really starts. We could talk about all the things internally, but if the recruiters and the people on the front line that are actually sourcing and trying to create a diverse pipeline aren't creating enough diverse pipeline, you know, you can't hire 30 Black people if you've only interviewed one. This doesn't make sense. So there needs to be conversations with recruiters, but then also with the HR teams from another white person that says, yeah, I know this might be a little weird. I know this might be a little uncomfortable, but here are the things that you could do so that it's not weird or not discriminatory. You're not asking weird questions to make this whole thing work.
Yeah, I mean, D&I is a business department in an organization. I don't know of any other business department whose strategy is everything. Right? And so here, and so it's a weird one. I want to play with this concept because if we focus on one sort of demographic, that maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, I don't know. The other thing is we're going to focus on everyone. It doesn't seem like a viable thing. And I would argue that we are not making a ton of progress in this. We're doing a lot of things and I don't see a ton of progress. Beth, I want to be curious what you would think about that, and please, like, you know, fight me on it if you think I'm out of line.
No, I mean, I've worked in the tech industry for about a decade, and we are not seeing progress. It's a largely white field, and it's disappointing. And there's all these wonderful programs like Coded by Kids and Tech Girls, and you know, bringing technology to youth, but that doesn't mean that youth is going to want to become an engineer, right? Like that youth might decide to become an artist or a chef, or like they could be anything. And so I don't know how to solve it, but I do think that when you think about all the different kinds of diversity, it's hard to think about them all at once and say, like, we're going to focus on all of these at once. And I think the easier way, at least in my experience, is to focus on the inclusion piece, to focus on creating an environment where people can show up with their whole selves and just belong. And I heard someone say recently that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. And that really, really stuck with me. And I think that too often, especially in tech, the number of hiring managers who just said, I can't really see myself having a beer with that person. I'm like, we're not hiring them to drink beer with you. We're hiring them to be an engineer, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you want to have beer with them. Can they code? And what they're really saying is like, yeah, that person isn't like me, you know, like we didn't go to the same school, we're not in the same frat, whatever. But really, if you create a space where people understand how to hire in an objective, sort of scientific way, and create a culture where people are celebrated for whoever they are, whatever, because the reality is any group of people you get together, even if the color of their skin and their gender are all the same, they are diverse in some ways, right? Like diversity is just like differences within a group. A person cannot be diverse. A person is unique. A group can be diverse. And so creating an environment where you're not only allowed to be bring all of your uniqueness to the group, but you're also celebrated for doing so, and people get curious about it, and they want to hear your point of view on something. Like that's where I think that then you make room for diversity of all kinds.
Great, thank you. Kayla, what would you add to that conversation? You are making a career out of D&I as we speak. So what do you make of this?
So I think that D&I needs to be across all functions too. You know, we spoke a lot here about creating diversity within your workforce and within your talent pipelines and all that fantastic stuff. But if you're also not living and breathing it, like, what are you doing? You know, there are so many ways that you can integrate diversity strategies within all your business functions and all your products and all your services. Like, if you're going out there and you're offering product lines, are you ensuring that your marketing is inclusive? Are you ensuring that your supply chains are inclusive? Or where are you spending your money philanthropically? Are you supporting lobbying efforts, and where are your business dollars really going? Because honestly, like, we talk about how to retain that talent and the diverse talent. If your employees are seeing that you're putting your money where your mouth is in all functions of your business, and not just within hiring folks and trying to check off that generic text check box, check off the check box, right? Yeah, that's it. Right? I think that's English. But if you're doing more than just checking off that box, then I think that's what that retention, that's how you keep folks there, and you're actually truly creating a culture of inclusion.
That's great.
As you were talking, it was funny. I was thinking about an experience I had a few weeks ago where I had a white guy, frankly, who I don't know from Adam's house cat, so to speak, literally reached out to me because he knew that I had the woman minority owned business certification. I really, when I say I don't know this guy, because literally he knew that would get him more points if I were to agree to sign on to work with him. So that's part of our problem with diversity. I don't think we really value diversity. Oftentimes I think it's about the check marks. And I think part of the way that you get people not to value diversity, but looking at the accountability, their gains and losses. So many of my clients reach out to me for diversity and harassment stuff. When they're about to be sued, they think they're going to be sued, or they think they're going to be humiliated somehow publicly for what they are or aren't doing. I think one of the things that might be worth considering, how do organizations improve their internal whistleblower policies so that somebody can ring the alarm going, hey, do you realize this might get us jammed up publicly? This could turn to a lawsuit. What if we looked at ways to make it easier for people to not have to go seek out that buddy, as Bruce said, to say, look, I'm just going to pull your coattail. If this doesn't get fixed, this is going to go way left. I think what most organizations, at least in my experience as a business owner, has been, it's about what do I have to gain or what do I have to lose? And frankly, in the space that we work in, we all have so many things that we're trying to do. We don't have the time or the ability to change somebody's thought processes. So really then it becomes, how do you focus on getting the behavior to change? And unfortunately, I see it as a function of carrots and sticks. I don't see many people who are talking about diversity just because they think it is the right thing to do. I think that's few and far between, unfortunately. I think the reality is about compliance rather than about culture.
And Mylena, what's interesting about that is when I am talking to customers and HR leaders, and they're looking at all the things that they're doing across all the functions of HR, they can clearly see a direct impact to the bottom line, all these other areas. So if we have turnover, we know that the cost of turning over people, we've put a dollar amount on it. If we have low engagement, we know that that's going to directly impact turnover. If you have poor performance, then that means people aren't going to do their job well, sales, marketing, whatever it is. But what we haven't been able to do, as many, Gartner and Accenture and all these white papers that come out that say globally, the companies that are more diverse actually exceed 14% revenue or blah, 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 whatever it says. Most companies just think that that's total bullshit and they don't really internalize it. So until we can actually say, here's the business impact, just diversity for diversity's sake, I don't think it's ever really going to change because businesses won't have an incentive to really make it happen. I think it just sounds just too altruistic and just too doing good for the sake of doing good versus, oh, this is something that we absolutely have to do. But then that's how you get protests. And then that's how you get people calling out companies. And until you get things like that, then it's like, oh, okay, now we need to donate money. Now we need to put marketing dollars out there. Now we need to hook up with all these different nonprofits. But until you're forced to do it, just like you were saying in regards to lawsuits, a lot of times you won't do it unless it seems that it's going to be some type of direct impact in a positive or a really negative impact on the bottom line.
That totally mirrors our society, right? These police departments aren't changing their rules because they just had an epiphany one day. They're being demanded to do that by the people who are stepping up and demanding it, right? So I think there's something to that, and I think that we're starting to see that more and more in our companies, right? The employees having a voice, using their voice, holding their companies accountable on where their money goes and how they're spending it and what they're doing. And that's a tricky one for HR too, right? Like, I think HR sits in the middle of that, of sort of, in a lot of cases, being on board, but also, again, having this need to protect the company, right? And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I want to switch gears. Actually, it's not even switching gears. The conversation that we just had reminded me of a question that was asked by someone in the audience. And I want to read this verbatim so I don't mess it up. The question says, are Black job seekers and employees viewed as valuable contributors with talent and expertise? Now, the story that I have made up about this question, obviously that's the only data that I have. I don't even know who wrote it. But the story that I've made up is that this is a person who's kind of exasperated by the talk and wonders if there's actually going to be any change. Kayla, can you empathize with this person, assuming my story is correct?
It's interesting because I actually I think, took that, like the way you said that question a little bit differently.
Ooh, tell me.
So, because I almost see it as the person's asking the question, like, do we see that Black people are talented and valued, right? Like that if you have a Black candidate versus a white candidate, are you going to see them as talented as this white person? And I hate to say it, but I'm kind of pessimistic about it. I'm not entirely sure if I feel that culturally we all agree that Black folks are just as talented as white people. I mean, we know the numbers, right? Like we see resumes out here with Black, quote unquote, Black sounding names are less likely to get the interviews. So Black people have been taught that they have to perform at a higher level. We have to always be on 100, maybe even 110, 120 to perform at that certain level. If we're at a job interview and we fumble a little bit, like that could ruin the whole day, versus somebody else could just be like, oh no, it's okay, pause for a second, gather yourself, and then like, let's try this again, where it's like that more camaraderie. So I'm a little bit pessimistic that I don't know if people really truly understand Black folks' talent and worth out here and what we do really bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, Beth, I'm going to bring you in here. Our three panelists of color have sort of expressed kind of frustration, exasperation, maybe pessimism, maybe I don't know if that's the right word, but the reality of their experiences. What can we do to change it? I mean, I know you've done some things at your organization, and I know that you've done some work on making resources available and some other things. What thoughts do you have on what people that look more like you and I can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this sort of ties back to the caring bystander thing, but I am always on the lookout for blurry words. So when I hear someone in a hiring process say like, I don't know if they're a culture fit, or I don't know if they're very articulate, or maybe they're not buttoned up enough. I'm like, tell me more about that, what that means. Like, can you be specific about what you exactly saw or heard in this interview that led you to believe that they are not buttoned up enough for the role? And also, what does buttoned up mean?
Yes, what does that mean?
Like that? I don't know. And so trying to call out those moments that are frankly racist, maybe not intentionally so, but really force them to be very specific about why they do not find this person to be the best hire. And I think that's really important. And I think that is a place where anyone who's involved in hiring and interviewing, even if you're not the decision maker, if you're in a room where you're hearing feedback on a candidate and you hear blurry words, whether it's a woman, a Black person, someone with a disability, whoever it is, ask why they're asking that. I worked for a company years ago that was like super snobby about colleges, and would like cut people based on what college they went to. And I was like, I joined that company. I was like, oh no, that's not how we're going to do that here. No. I was like, actually, I don't think they need to have gone to college, because college teaches you nothing about how to do a job. I majored in theater. I don't know if you can tell, but like it's good. Like college is a great formative experience. You learn a lot about yourself and problem solving and free thought, and that's great. But it didn't teach me anything about how to do a job. And so cutting out those like unnecessary things from the evaluation process, like saying they have to go to a certain tier of school or school at all. I mean, if you're like a doctor, then you probably need to go to school. There's certain jobs where you super do. But like, you don't to be an engineer, you don't to be a designer, you don't to be an HR, frankly, like you don't. And so making sure that you're evaluating candidates for the actual things that they will really be doing in the role. And I think one way to do that is rather than saying like, what are the qualifications? And I'll write up a job posting for you. It's like, what will this person accomplish in their first year? Because if you tell me what they need to accomplish, I can work back and tell you what skills they would need to be able to accomplish those goals. And I can also talk to the candidate during the hiring process about what they're going to be doing in the job and what they will accomplish, which will either get them very excited or have them self-select out because they'll say, oh, I don't think I'm ready to try to accomplish that. But then you're evaluating based on real job stuff and not on this blurry stuff that doesn't really matter. And I think this is not like a panacea. This does not solve the problem entirely, but I think it definitely helps if you have people in your organization who are willing to call that stuff out.
Oh, that's great. I saw a couple of head nods there. Mylena, what would you add to what Beth said?
No, I was just thinking about the culture fit question or issue comes up also all too often. And I think organizations aren't able often enough to quantify what that means. So does culture fit mean that we work late hours around here? Does it mean that you have to be willing to travel on a dime? What does culture fit mean? Because for me, when I hear culture fit, I hear fitting in. I hear code switching all day. I don't hear anything other than you haven't figured out a way to articulate why you don't like this person. You just know you won't have a beer with them. And frankly, if they're me, I don't like beer and I don't want to hang out with you anyway, but I want to be able to do the job. And I think the culture fit one is particularly difficult. And what I like to force employers to do when I'm working with them on issues around that, let's figure out what it means to be a part of your culture. Do you work late hours? Like that tends to be a lot of ones. Do you tend to be tethered to your office a lot? Do you expect people to respond pretty quickly, including on weekends and evenings, to cell phone messages, email stuff? Let's figure out what that means so it's not simply a function of preference. And that's even with things like attire and look. I often say to people, I'm a runner, and depending on what I have to do, what I look like in the morning, it's a bit tough getting to the where I'm going on time. And what I find is really interesting, you talk about, again, culture. What I look like sometimes is such a big deal. But when I look at my white counterparts with the high ponytail, if I were come in the same way with my natural hair, I don't know if that's professional enough. With all due respect, that thing over there isn't cute either. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is how do you recognize and own the biases that you have? It's not right or wrong. It's just simply your preference. And because somebody doesn't meet your preference, why can't you own that and let people do their jobs?
Right, have your preference after work, have it on the weekend, have it in your friend group. Like you can choose a lot of the people that you're around based on preference, but at work we choose you based on your skill and your ability to perform the job.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of people are uncomfortable with being self-aware enough to know that they have unconscious bias. And I know over the past couple of years, we've been talking about unconscious bias training, but I don't really think, and I've never been in one, but I also don't think from what I've heard that they're real enough or as real as they need to be. And I'm not saying that I'm the person that needs to do this, but I have a very straightforward personality. And I almost want it to be a workshop where and again, this goes back to maybe the person running the workshop being a white person so that other white people are more comfortable in saying something, saying, look, how do you really feel about XYZ type of person? Or if you saw this picture, because everyone knows that you're going to go on LinkedIn and look at the candidate and do all that stuff. So you're going to know what they look like. I mean, if we're being real. So what is it about this person that may make you think that they're not qualified for this job? And at first, everyone's going to feel super uncomfortable. No one wants to sound like a racist, but it needs to keep going on and on and on. And again, going back to those habit forming actions where people need to say, okay, look, this is total bullshit. what do you think about this person? Honestly, what do you think about this person when you see this picture? If you saw this man or woman come in for this job, what would you think? And in my space as a tech founder, one of the things that you're always doing, you're pitching to VCs and investors. And one of the things that they always talk about is team risk. And so they're always trying to de-risk the situation. And I see it the same way from the recruiting standpoint, where people are trying to de-risk the candidate. And I don't think people really understand what they're doing when they're trying to de-risk this candidate situation. One of the things that they're thinking is, this person is not similar to me, and so that's a risk. Or this person doesn't talk like me, that's a risk. This person didn't come from this type of background that I'm used to, that's a risk. I've never had a Black boss, so I don't even know how qualified a Black person is in this role, that's a risk. I've never worked with a Black person on my team, so I don't know how that person would fit in or operate in this type of environment, that's a risk. So before you even hear a word out of that person's mouth about how great they are and all the experience that they have, you already have 8, 9, 10 different types of risk in your head already. And so you're going into this situation of, let them prove to me and overcome all these barriers, versus coming in with a clean slate of just saying, hey, tell me how great you are, and then we'll hire you.
That makes such a good point, Bruce, because I think that's why representation is so key. We talk about, this person can't do it because I've never seen a Black person do that job before. So how do I know that they can do it? That's why we need representation. I can't remember where I read it, some article, something somewhere, but they said, the reason why Barack Obama was able to become president is because people saw that in media, that we had Black presidents in movies. And I was like, have we ever had a woman in movies? And I was like, I don't think we have either. So representation is really huge, and we really sometimes just need to take a shot against our biases and put somebody in that role. But we also then, what I want us to avoid is then, once we do get that person of color or that Black person in that role, that then it's not just their team that's getting diversified. How are we then also making sure that other teams are getting diversified as well within this conversation, once we do get some representation up there?
You know, the funny thing about this too, again, it speaks to how we don't embrace the data, because you're right, Bruce, they're going to look for all of these ways about how this person is similar to everybody else that's on the team. But if everybody is similar, if everybody frames the challenge, the problem in the same way, we don't have innovation, we don't have improvements, we keep churning out the same stuff. And at the end of the day, again, it speaks to, we don't believe the data that we get that tells us that when teams are diverse, that they're better. When leaders have more sense of camaraderie and engagement, that means people get to come together and be their authentic selves at work. We don't believe that data, or we aren't willing to confront ourselves to really own our biases, because I don't think any of us are without bias. But at the end of the day, if you can own your stuff, like the person you were talking about, Beth, who's very snobby about college. Look, if I can at least own my snobbery, at the end of the day, I can control for that in the decisions that I make, and then ask myself if that really matters in terms of the person's ability to do the job. But we have to make a decision. Do we think people don't get it, or they just don't care?
Miley, what I was going to, your point is so interesting about the data, because I actually don't think the data in itself will change people's mindset. Mm-hmm. What people are going to look at is their own historical data. So and I've built a company that has 100 employees, and I sold it for $30 million. And then I built another company, or worked at another company, and then that company was successful. And then I worked at another company, and that company was successful, and none of those companies were diverse. Then what would make that person ever want to think, now I need to make my company diverse? Is it going to make my business better? I've been successful without diversity. Mm-hmm. So we have to make a real business point, and it's going to have to be more important, and it can't just be, oh, I need to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
I don't exactly know how we're going to communicate that point, but historically, if you've been successful and worked at all these companies that have done what people keep telling them you can't do if you're not diverse, and they see firsthand that it's happening without the diversity, then how do you make the business case?
Mm-hmm. Good point. Very good point.
You know, one thing that we might be able to think about is, you know, we talk about all this data, and we've had this data for a while, right? Like, how long have we been talking about the percentages? And right now, I think, 4 Black men are within the Fortune 500 companies. There's 0 Black women. Like, we have the data out here. What I think could help us is if we start to normalize the Black experience. If we start to have conversations about what this experience is like in the workplace, what people are actually experiencing as they walk down the halls. I shouldn't have to have a conversation with my colleague about whether or not she's going to take her braids out before she has an interview. Like, I just shouldn't have to. But those microaggressions are happening in your workplaces. That is what's stopping us from creating a culture of inclusion and helping people to progress and move further, because I think we still somewhat think that this doesn't exist, that, oh, my company's not racist, my company does this, my managers don't do these things. We've had the diversity training, but we're not having these real conversations about what the Black person's experiencing, because we have to cover at work. We're not showing you our true selves. You may think we're friends, but we're cool because I gotta have a job. Absolutely. I promise we're friends. If I say we're friends, because it takes a lot to live in your authentic truth, and you have to work hard to get there. I am lucky to work in D&I, where honestly, if I can't live in my authentic truth, then like, what am I doing? You know, and I have that privilege, so I try to help amplify that voice and create that culture where I am, especially within my ERGs, especially with the people that I interact with and my business partners, to create that sense of authentic truth, because we need our stories told. We need to normalize this. Hey, I feel this. That hurt. Actually, I didn't like the fact that you just talked over me in this meeting, or you're trying to demean the fact that I'm trying to get a higher education, because my people don't do that. Like, what do you mean there? You gotta normalize it.
You know, on that point, Kayla, there's a question from someone in the audience who's sort of curious. You know, we all face the challenge of trying to create a more inclusive workplace. What do you do when there's a group saying, well, you acknowledged that group, but why not this group, right? Why don't Latino lives matter? Why don't XYZ, right? Like, how do you respond to that in the workplace?
Every group has its unique challenges, unfortunately. Like, that's why, you know, I love the term people of color, because it is intentionally inclusive. It is basically a term to use to refer to anybody who's non-white, right? It's the more appropriate way to say non-white. But when you sometimes lump everybody into that group, you are then maybe discrediting or leaving other people behind. I can't remember the catchy phrase that people use about being, you know, when you're trying to be super inclusive, you're intentionally exclusive. I think that maybe it's something along those lines. But in this conversation today, we got to talk about Black folks. We got to talk about African-American folks. Like, this is the struggles that they're having. They have different struggles than Asian folks, right? That bamboo ceiling is not the same ceiling that Black women are facing in the C-suite. Like, it's 2 different things. And sometimes we just got to sit down and say, and recognize sometimes we are giving preference. Mm-hmm. Just as we gave preference to those white guys for so long, we got to give preference to these other communities in the ways that they need it, especially if intersectionality is happening and we have women and their race being impacted here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Another question from our audience, actually for you, Kayla, you are very popular amongst our audience, I have to say.
You know, they love me. The people love me, you know?
You brought your fan club. I'm only a little bit jealous. They said, can you talk a bit more about how you partner with ERGs as talent pipeline influencers, and generally to assist with diverse recruitment?
Yeah, so I love to leverage my employee resource groups all the time. They are like an extension of our D&I office, right? Like, if we're gonna take it, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jennifer Brown's spectrum of progression for ERGs. Like, I'm doing it so not justice for all the folks on the phone, but it's like a progression model. That's what it is. But you're taking them from like programmatic and just kind of being community building and some social activities to really business impact. If you're going to make some truly business impact ERGs, you got to get them involved in all of these strategic initiatives. They are subject matter experts in their community and their constituent base. So why not go to them and ask them, hey, oh, we want more Black folks in our organization, and you have a really awesome campus recruiting program. I bet you $5 your Black focused ERG is going to ask the question of, what HBCUs are you going to? I bet you there's probably a good chunk of folks on this call who don't even know what an HBCU is, which is a historically Black college or university. And that will help diversify your talent pipelines. These ERGs can be talent, also talent pools for you. I don't know if we always talk about external hiring, but what are you doing internally? Again, my ERGs are amazing talent developers. So can you connect your recruiters in with your ERGs to find budding talent and high performers? Because honestly, if you're an ERG, you're a high performer, honestly, because again, you have to be that dual impact employee. So there's so many ways to leverage them, to give their expertise here, and to tap into a whole talent pipeline that you may not even know existed.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, when I think about sort of the role of HR, and maybe this is even a generational thing, right? But if we think about at the workplace, it wasn't that long ago that the mandate or the expectation was do not talk about politics, do not talk about difference, do not talk about, right? Like you come to work, you put on your work face, you leave work, and then you can do whatever you want at home. And the culture of our workplaces has really shifted, right? And now the social and political forces have really intertwined with our workplaces, and we are talking about these things, hence this conversation. So how do we help these, our audience, for example, who some of them might be those people, right? Gosh, I grew up in HR 30 years ago when we weren't supposed to talk about this. Now we are supposed to talk about this. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here. Beth, I'd like to point this to you, and it makes me think of, you know, the conversation that we had about us specifically, but white people in general sort of being paralyzed by some of this, and kind of what that means for the impact that we can possibly have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy, especially over the last several weeks, it's felt very overwhelming. And I think white people, or not all white people, but many white people have had their eyes really opened at how very little we have been doing and how much we needed to be doing and are starting to do now. And so I think that, but knowing that there's just so much, that how do you do when you need to do everything, how do you do anything, right? Like it feels paralyzed. And I had a call with a few HR friends a few days after the protests and the riots in Philly had started, and we were like, let's go around the circle and talk about like one word of how we're feeling, and all 12 of us said overwhelmed. And we're like, okay, we need to snap out of this, because we can't just sit here like deer in headlights waiting for somebody else to take action. Like we have to get our shit together and do something here. And now we are. But I think, and you said it earlier, Kristen, that like this is a white people problem to solve. I'm glad that there are Black people still in this conversation, but like this is a white people problem to solve, because we created racism, we benefit from racism, we preserve the structures that hold other people down, and we need to dismantle them. But I think at work, that's a really tricky thing, because you don't know what beliefs people around you might secretly hold. And so one thing that I keep coming back to, because in my mind, this is not a political issue, this is a human issue. And we're all humans in the workplace. And frankly, just based on what we believe about our values and our culture at my company, hate has a place there. So if you have a problem with us saying racism is not okay, then I will show you where the door is. Like, you're not welcome here, right? Like you can be any political affiliation you want, you can be any religion you want, but hate has no place. And so if you're not willing to just accept everyone around you as humans and just get curious about what their experience is, you'll never learn. And if you don't want to learn, then, and we're an innovation company, if you don't want to learn and you're not curious, then again, you're probably not the best fit for us. And maybe you want to go work for that 30-year-old like stodgy company where they don't talk about politics or humanity. But I do think that like one thing that helps is like some ground rules, like helping people, especially if this is the first time your organization is openly having conversations about race and about racism. It's a charged subject. It can be hard to talk about. It impacts everyone differently. Everyone has had different experiences with it, and you don't know what those experiences are, regardless of what you see their outward appearance to look like. And so we had one in my company a couple weeks ago. We were just voluntary, like, let's get, and we're a small, like 40-person company. We had about 12 or 13 people show up to this open forum. And I just laid some ground rules of like, you know, we're going to get curious. If your point of view gets challenged, you're not going to get defensive. You're going to ask questions to find out why that person has that point of view. No matter how much you disagree, your goal is going to be to understand. We're going to use I statements. We're going to talk about our experiences. We're not going to talk about other people's experiences because you don't know anything about that. And there were others, but we kind of read through them. We all agreed to like, this is the space that we're entering right now. And it was such an open, wonderful dialogue that has now, it really started something in our company where now this is something that we're talking about. And we never really had intentionally talked about it at work. And I'm glad, I regret that it took us this long, but I'm glad we're here now. And I think that there's, you know, sadly, many companies who are not there yet, but lots of companies that are and starting to take these steps and just willing to take the step into discomfort and embrace it and just say, I don't know what the outcome of this conversation is going to be. I can't control it, but I'm going to be brave and have it anyways. And I might get my ass kicked. I don't know. You know, my belief system might be totally destroyed, but I'm willing to go in there and just educate myself and learn.
Thank you. So as we're looking at the time here, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to hear from all of our panelists. Bruce, one of the questions that came in was, what advice do you have for employees that, specifically for Black employees who are just so fucking tired of having this conversation? Pardon my language, everybody, but this is Disrupt HR. So Bruce, what advice do you have for those employees?
To simplify it, I would say self-care is the best care. And so, you know, in the spirit of it being Disrupt HR, look, I don't want to fucking talk about it. I'm done. I've talked about it. Sure, I appreciate you and whatever you're saying. I appreciate you caring, but I have a lot of shit to do. Oh, and by the way, I'm going through all the stress and anxiety and all the other negative feelings of COVID and unemployment and all the other stuff that's going on too. I mean, that was just the tip on the iceberg, but there was a whole bunch of stuff that was negatively affecting a bunch of people. Maybe you know somebody that just passed away from COVID. Maybe somebody in your family just lost their job. Maybe someone is dealing with mental health issues from being locked in their house for 3 months. You got all this shit going on, and then somebody wants to talk to you every day about what's going on. Again, self-care is the best care. And you just need to let people know, look, I appreciate your concerns, but like at this point, I plead the fifth. I can't really talk about this right now. Maybe I'll talk about it later. And then I hope that other people who look at themselves as allies or advocates or whatever we're calling it, respect that. And say, you know what? I appreciate that. Maybe I'll ask somebody else, or maybe I won't. And maybe I'll just keep it to myself. I mean, you want to keep the communication open, but at the same time, it can become overwhelming, especially if you're in a space where you're one of the only Black people around, then you're the designated person.
Yeah.
You're the person that everyone's asking, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on? How should I talk to somebody else in my company? And then it turns you into the person that is communicating for your entire race of people.
Yeah. As if there wasn't already enough on you. Here's one more. Can you own this too?
Right. And you still might be trying to process and internalize this shit yourself. You might not even have the words or the description of how you're feeling yet. So to now talk to this person and then try to talk them through what you're thinking, what they should be thinking, how you're thinking about what they're thinking, that's a lot of shit. And so you might just want to keep it to yourself, figure this out. And then if you want to come out of your shell and then talk to people about it later, people should understand that and you know, feel comfortable with that reason.
Yeah. I mean, as if we haven't listed 1,457,622 reasons why we should have more Black people in our organizations. There's another one, right? Where that person, I counted them. That's accurate. But this person, right? You in this case, as you're using the first person, are so tired of having this conversation because you're the only one. And if there was a whole group of us, maybe we would be able to share that load a little bit inside the workplace.
You know, I see it as my responsibility in D&I to alleviate that workload for him. You know, like if he worked in my organization, I'd be like, this is not your responsibility to have all these conversations. I was really lucky to have a really great, so our ERG that's focused on Black and African American associates is LEAD, Leaders and Employees of African Descent. They did a fantastic job to put together a newsletter of resources that specifically first and foremost called out and said, hey, my Black fellow family, friends, colleagues, here's some resources for your mental health, and here's how you could take care of yourself. But we also want to alleviate this burden on you because we know a lot of white folks are coming up to you. We know. So here are some resources that all you need to do is just forward this newsletter on over and just be like, hey, I can't talk about this, but go read up on it, please. And then go maybe talk to DNI because, you know, again, I love to talk about this. I'll get up on my soapbox all day, every day and talk about this. But I will say I got a little exhausted as well. And I had a confliction. I was like, I'm supposed to be in this space. I'm supposed to be this person that people can come to and have these candid conversations with. But I was getting like friends and family and then like coworkers coming to me like, hey, I want to talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, but I also just experienced it too. So I need to process this myself. So we all definitely need to take a step back and just say, hey, we need that pause. But as DNI and HR, we need to step up and provide resources so that the burden is not on just our Black employees and associates. Let's alleviate a little bit about what can we do to alleviate that weight.
Yeah. That's great. I think implicit in what you said was sort of the unnecessary necessity for us white people to be taken care of again. Mm-hmm. Oh, can you send me the resource? Give me the education. Tell me.
Yes. I had somebody ask me if I can compile all the resources from all that, because they want to be an ally to everyone. So if I can compile all the resources for each individual communities and give them, because they don't have the time to sometimes do that research.
Did you send them a link to google.com?
Yeah, google.com.
That actually would have been that is what I needed to do, but I did not. I literally just looked at it. I was like, I need to come back to this message because right now I just don't have the energy to even somewhat try and respond to this because it just felt so, I know it was intended well because they wanted to be an ally, but you know, I hope that person, you know, then kind of found some guidance in a sense of like, to be an ally, you got to take that active stance to be.
Yeah, do they think like, being an ally is just reading an article and going to sleep? Like being an ally takes real actual work every day. And if you're not willing to Google some articles, like you're not an ally.
And I think that's the problem. I think we just established and said, we've done these unconscious bias trainings. We said, go be, take DNI and it's serious and whatever. But we're not addressing giving people tools and resources to do it. Like, honestly, you're saying, oh, you need to be a better person. But they like, oh, an ally just means I have a Black friend. Well, actually, it means more than that. And as a company, we don't expect people just to be able to do their job without some training. So why not give them some ally training? Why not say, here are some actionable steps that you can do to be a better ally? And here are the resources. And me as an organization, because I'm telling you, you need to be a better ally, I'm going to give this to you.
And Kayla, what are like a couple of bullet points of things that would be included in how to be a better ally?
Yeah, so I definitely would break it down to some key areas. You know, you first want to make sure you're aware of your own biases, right? You want to make sure you're sitting here reflecting on yourself. There's some great association tests out there that you can take and that gives you a reflection on where you're sitting at when it comes to your own biases. Then I would say, then take your time to align yourself with that group that you're trying to be an ally for. You can't, just because you say you're an ally for the LGBTQ plus community does not mean you're an ally for the Black community. We have two different struggles. It sometimes comes out similarly, but we experience the world differently. So you need to make sure that you're doing the work to align yourself with that specific constituency base or that community that you're trying to be an ally for. Then last and foremost, be active about it. Have dialogues, be an upstander. We talked about so many things here today about how you can go and actively make a change. And honestly, I challenge all of you to go talk to your peers because that's what we need. We need y'all to be voices and continue this message because Black folks can't continue to have these conversations. We just can't do it. Clearly, y'all haven't been listening to us for a while. So we need y'all to amplify our voices, unfortunately. As they say at the table, when you bring women onto the table and you need men to amplify their voices, we need white folks to amplify the voices of our Black peers and friends and colleagues and families and stand up to the racism that's out here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yes, we do need white people to amplify voices. Finally, Mylena, what sort of final thoughts are you sitting with that you might want to share with our audience on this topic?
I've actually been stewing on that for a moment myself. I think one of the things that just strikes me about this is, for me, how I deal with this. And I'm not sure if I'm speaking from a place of luxury, but one of the things that I've been able to do has been to demand my right to show up in spaces and be authentic. I decided some years ago that I was going to stop code switching. So when you call me, I don't sound like this. I'm not changing my voice. I'm not doing all of those other things, because what I realized that the constant code switching, the cognitive load of that deprived me of my ability to be in the moment and do my best work. So what I would say to folks as we prepare to end is find the courage to actually show up authentically. It is tough and some people might not like it, but you owe yourself that, because frankly, when you're trying to toggle all of that, it robs you, and you owe yourself the opportunity to come to work and show up in every other space as who you really are.
I think when we talked, I wrote down a quote that you said, I demand a space where I can be me, or I will not enter.
Indeed.
And thus your own company was born.
Indeed. Indeed.
Nice.
That is great. Well, this we're wrapping up here, folks. It's right around 6 o'clock. We've actually even gone over. I want to thank a few people here. First of all, you, the audience, you signed up, you came, you were here. I really appreciate that. I saw a ton of chats. I couldn't quite get to all of them, but we will look at them. And there's a lot of engagement in the topics. Kayla's fan club, just part of it. So thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Thank you for bringing your energy, your questions, your anger, your outrage, and everything else. I want to thank the founders, or the coordinators of the DisruptHR in Philadelphia group, Kelly and Michael and Tori, and I know there's a bunch of others that I'm not mentioning. Right now, the next event is scheduled for November 5th. We'll see what COVID has in store for us and see if that comes to fruition. Really appreciate you guys putting this together and creating a space for HR folks to come and have these hard conversations. There's probably going to be an email coming out afterwards with some resources, including a Slack group, if anybody wants to join that and continue the conversation virtually. And then lastly, I want to thank our panelists. Your candor, your courage, your openness, your willingness to be a part of this conversation, to do it again in this way, we really appreciate it. And I'm super honored to be a part of it. I keep learning this lesson over and over and over again, that the most marginalized among us consistently model the courage and conviction that we all should have. So thank you very much for showing up. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for engaging in the dialogue. This has been super meaningful to me, and I hope for our audience as well. So everyone take care, have a lovely evening, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, Kristen. You were a fantabulous moderator.
Amazing.
Like,
Or tell me